Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. Welcome to episode number 255 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto. Today we're jamming on the deeper issues that prevent diversity from happening. And this was one of those interviews that I didn't want to end. I enjoyed our guest, Luna Love, so much. Luna is a woman of devotion, a transformational leadership mentor, and host of the Ladies Who Lead podcast. I was recently on her show, and I also loved that conversation, so we'll definitely link up to that in the show notes. But her big truth in this interview was around the body and mind being colonized. So the interview is filled with charged topics, but it's not a supercharged conversation, if that makes sense. Like, it's a loving, easygoing, curious exploration of all of these things, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So we explored things like the European standard of beauty, righteousness, entitlement, and hierarchy, the internal conflict that comes with being mixed race, which is both of our experiences, as well as decentering, the prioritization of ourselves, our work, our businesses, missions, and etc. And we also got into grief, desire, leadership, and power. So again, it's a really deep, really rich conversation. Enjoy this one, share it up. This is definitely one of those conversation piece episodes that would probably be awesome to share with some close friends that you know you can dive in around these topics with and see what comes up for you. This is episode number 255, so the show notes will be at untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -255. So again, that's untameyourself.com/TT-255. As well, some things we have going on throughout the rest of the year are our Wild Soul Movement weekend workshops. There's one coming up in Chicago in August and Asheville, North Carolina in October. And if you have not yet checked out the Trust Assessment, the Trust Assessment is a progress tracking tool for growth-oriented people. So if you're someone who loves to work on yourself, you read books, you listen to podcasts, maybe you do courses and programs, or you study a lot to grow and learn and expand, the Trust Assessment is something that can really help you see how all that work is actually paying off for you. So head on over to thetrustassessment.com. You can take the assessment for free, And you can upgrade for the advanced report if you want to get a little more specific deep dive into how much you're trusting yourself as an indicator of your growth in the areas of health, wealth, relationships, and self-mastery. So again, that can be found at thetrustassessment.com. And if you want to check out our Wild Soul Movement weekend workshops, head on over to wildsoulmovement.com/workshops. Now let's get into the show. Luna Love, how cool is your name?
It's pretty cool.
Now, did you pick that? Is that really your name?
Well, it's really my name. And yes, I picked it.
Okay. You're like, yes,
it's
both.
Not my birth name.
Got it. That's what I meant.
Yeah, really my name. It's funny because like, I actually like now I'm like, it's so like hippy dippy out there. And anyone who knows me like really well is like, it's so your name, but you're so not that person.
Interesting.
And it's really funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's my name. It's been my name for 7 years.
Oh, cool. And what made you pick it?
Well, my birth name is Whitney.
No
Whitney
way.
Page.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just didn't feel like my name.
Yeah.
And Luna was like the moon when I was little, and now still is something that like when I was an only child, and I would like kind of sit in my bedroom window and like look at the moon when I was in Crossroads or like just adolescent nonsense and got the feels, and it would be a support system for me. And so it just felt like I was growing into that for myself at that time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it became my name.
I love that.
I love Love because it's like your last name is often like where you're from or your occupation traditionally. Mm-hmm. And so it's both.
It's
my
that.
Occupation and where I'm from.
So I know you're getting married soon. Are you going to change your last name or hyphenate it or no?
We're hyphenating. We're both hyphenating.
Oh, I love that. So what's it going to be?
So we're becoming the Isbell Love family.
Shut up.
So his name is Isbell, like Isabel without the A in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And so we're both becoming Isbell Love hyphenated.
This is very cool. I like this a lot.
I love it.
Not that it matters to anyone if I like it, but I do.
Yeah.
So first on topic question. What is a truth that's having a big impact in your life right now?
I love this question. The truth that feels like it's really impacting me right now is, and it has been for a number of months in a bigger way, is this idea of like my body and my mind being colonized. Mm-hmm. And that is just true. I don't want it to be true, but it's true. And colonized with beliefs that aren't mine, that I actually don't believe, colonized with like ways of being and behaviors and like storage in my cells of things of domestication, of ways of being, of appeasing others that are just not really who I am, who I want to be, that I've adopted from growing up in the environment that I've grown up in the culture. And so that truth is like just acknowledging that is true and seeing how bound up in that I am has been such a gift to be able to start to unravel and unpack and reclaim a lot of those pieces. And it feels like a lifetime of work in this culture that we're in, because I still like need something and go to stores that I don't necessarily want to support because of convenience. There's so many ways that that colonized mindset has like infiltrated my being. And so just naming that as true has allowed me to start to do that work, just kind of acknowledging that that's really real.
I appreciate this, and I'm with you 100%. There's been a lot of things over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, that just acknowledging is really real for me, that have been absolutely mind-blowing. And it's funny because right before we got on this interview, I was being interviewed by my friend Amy Ehlers. And one of the things that she was saying is, because she asked me about, I came out of a relationship that was like very emotionally abusive, very narcissistic person. And she's like, I think a lot of people assume that a smart, strong, powerful woman would almost be immune to that. Like, how could that happen to someone like you? And what you're saying here is, with all of us. How many people listening right now are probably like, they care about people. They don't want to be racist. They wouldn't actually, if given the opportunity, consciously discriminate against someone or take something away from someone. But in our mindset and in our psyche, deep is programmed, and we do it in such subtle, nuanced ways.
Oh, yeah.
Like no one escapes this because, like you said, it's just the culture. It's ingrained. It doesn't excuse it either.
No. Yeah, it's so subtle. Like I gave the example of straightening my hair because like that's not something anyone would say is racist at all. But it comes from a place inside of me that has grown up seeing a European standard of beauty of like perfect, wavy, somewhat straight, shiny hair. And my hair does not look anything like that. It's wild and frizzy and kinky and like out of control. And, you know, it does actually scare people at times. Like if I just let it be, my partner will be like, whoa.
Yes.
And it's that whoa that is programmed. And it's that as soon as it's like done or straightened or something, all of a sudden the compliments are like, oh, wow, you look so beautiful. Look at this.
God.
Like, and it's right there. It's so subtle. And it's my own belief that I have to fit into a European standard of beauty that perpetuates that. And sometimes it's like, oh, now I consciously know that and I'm choosing to do it anyway because it's for me. And it's like that belief is not what's causing that choice. And so many people do things like that, just subtle nuances that are just like deep, deep down that are like, how could we think that that's a racist thing? But it totally is.
Yeah. And obviously I can really relate on the hair thing. I can't even tell you. This is why one of my favorite songs is the India Arie song, I Am Not My Hair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I still am trying to believe it, you know? Because there are, and I live in LA now where it's the land of hair extensions and things are done up and manicured. And I go to the Soho House and there's like these beautiful, stunning people by the standards that I'm conditioned to think things are beautiful and stunning. And I'm rolling in, like, if you're watching this right now, we actually have a similar situation happening. It's probably haven't washed your hair in a couple of days. It's going up in a bun and we're hoping for the best, you know? It's raining out here today. So like the humidity is high and it's just like a frizz fest. And you're right. Like I've been so ashamed, but at the same time in my life, I have no desire to invest the amount of time in having silky smooth hair that I would need to. Like ain't nobody got time for that. So it's fascinating. What other ways? I'm curious for you. Or like I love that example because I could super relate to it. Which, by the way, anyone listening who has like lovely, beautiful, naturally thick and wavy hair, like great. We're not upset with you and we're not blaming you or judging you.
No. What other ways does this show up? Any sense of, so like my curriculum, this life is so about righteousness and entitlement. It's like the thing that I'm always catching myself like, ooh, catching it again. And it's from a mindset of better than, right? And so that colonial mindset is like, well, there's a hierarchy of better than. And it doesn't mean that I'm buying into the same standards of hierarchy that colonial mindset is placed, but just that I give myself the agency to think that at all about anything is that colonial mindset. And, when I was like 16, this book, Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, was suggested to me. And then when I was like 19 and 23, like my whole life, people would meet me and be like, you have to read this book. And I never read it. And I read it last year. And this is one of the like big blow the door open on the colonial mindset awareness for me. This book, I couldn't put it down. I wanted to read it from cover to cover as soon as I had my hands on it. And it blew my mind open and it was things that I already knew, but inviting me to see them inside of myself through the context of my own body and mind.
Yes.
And looking at culture. And it's just so apparent in culture now because I have those glasses on of seeing it. I can see it everywhere all the time.
Was that overwhelming for you at first? It's a leading question because that's been my experience. I'm not going to pretend I'm not leading you. But So it was like, now you had these new goggles, you read this book and you could see things you couldn't before. What happened?
It was hard to function. It was hard to function. It was hard to drive and see like a Target or like a Home Goods, like every 2 miles. Mm-hmm. It was hard to kind of see how comfortable we are with monopolizing resources for our own comfort.
Yeah.
And being so unwilling to see the effects of that on the greater whole. And because I had these glasses on, I was like pretty depressed and non-functional for like on and off for like a few, like the month that I had read the book, I read it and then I read it again. And I kind of just was like, oh, like do I leave? Do I just like move to another country where this is different? Do I, I am someone who used to live where I lived more on the land, made more things myself. And I've gotten away from that because I'm busy and I'm an entrepreneur and I don't have time to do all of that all the time. And I hear my own excuses. And it's something that brings me a lot of groundedness, is like making things and like foraging things and weaving a basket myself and like all of these things, which I do to a certain extent, but not in the way that I have at different times in my life. And just seeing how like, oh, Amazon Prime, I can get this tomorrow, done. And not really seeing like, oh shit, like that totally has a bigger like ripple effect. And it's just like, oh, well, this is my convenience, and my convenience is a priority at times. And then it really was like, your convenience is not a priority. Your convenience is like fucking up the world. And if we don't all see how we prioritize that, I don't know, we're on the road to extinction pretty quickly, which is totally fine. Like humans becoming extinct is not necessarily a big deal. But I mean, like the Earth is going to be fine. Like we're going to prove ourselves right. We're a priority. And if we prioritize ourselves, that'll be the result. Yeah. Because if we live in a like human-centric world, then we're missing this like whole spectrum of life that is part of that, because we center ourselves as man, as human. And that's totally part of the colonial mindset, is like everything's for our taking.
Yeah, this is really important. And I don't remember in what order, if my friend Natalie Lucie's interview, I think it might go up after yours or maybe right before by a week or two. But my friend Natalie, she actually runs a software company, but she was like, okay, now that you're doing this truth telling on your podcast, can I please come on and talk about sustainability and like growing your own food and all these things and like the ecosystem and like what's going on, global warming, all these things. And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. Eco-diversity and biodiversity and how she thinks that relates to other diversity issues with people and other structures. So it's a really, really cool connection. And you're saying this, and I'm remembering her saying, about the extinction thing, right? Like we could be extinct. Like if we continue doing this, doing things the way they have been done now for the last few centuries, especially most recently, we'll extinguish ourselves basically, because we're not living in harmony with nature. And people have heard me say this on the show all the time, and actually I said this, you interviewed me Monday, just a couple of days ago at the time of recording this. And I said, nature is my favorite teacher, because she doesn't take more than she needs. She's the master of using what she has. She doesn't do anything fast, which is essentially the opposite of the mindset you're talking about. It's like, hurry up, get it by whatever means necessary. Take what is not yours. It doesn't matter. Like, no consequences. I think that's the crux of it, right? There's actually far more consequences than anyone ever imagined.
Yeah. So the first part for me is like, okay, seeing it. So once I see it, then the next thing is like awareness without aligned action is pretty futile. Having a bunch of awareness around what's wrong and then not changing my actions to support the awareness that I've just become attuned to is like, well, what does my awareness give me if I'm just continuing to do all the same stuff? Totally. So having that sense of like, okay, now that I have this new awareness, how can I align my actions to support this learning that I just had, to support this truth that's just become, that I've just remembered? And so just becoming aware of them without changing anything doesn't really make a difference. So if we just talk about the problems, but don't necessarily
do anything.
Like, oh yeah, there are these problems. Okay, great. We've named them, but like, but now what do we do?
This is a really great segue into the thing I'm most excited to talk to you about today, which is, so for anyone who isn't aware of this, which there's no reason why you should be, anyone listening. Like if you follow Luna, you would be, or if you follow a couple other people, maybe you might be, but it was just happening on a very small corner of the internet a couple weeks ago. But there was a summit. And so again, for anyone who needs context, these online summits, which tend to be free, and there's like 20 to 24 speakers, and it happens over the course of a couple days, and you could listen to all these interviews. And this particular summit was called the Urban Priestess Summit, hosted by two women, one of whom I'm friends with, and I know her. And actually, the other one I did a module of yoga teacher training with many years ago. And it's funny because it didn't resonate for me. I didn't finish the yoga teacher training because I was like, this isn't my jam. And so what happened was, it's called Urban Priestess, and they're like, for the most part, out of like maybe 25, 30 people, 90% of them were white women. And there's also a lot of built into it, the messaging, the visualization, the marketing, cultural appropriation. Now, these are volatile assessments because for some of them, it's like kind of, how do you measure? Like there are no hard and fast rules. It's kind of the Wild West as we try to dismantle these things and talk about it. And so Luna gets out there with the, I'm sure, intention of just like, let's have a conversation. Like, what's going on here? Is this good enough? Does this need to be better? But it like really turned into a whole thing. So I'll let you give more detail. So first, I'd love to know how it went down. And we talk about impact versus intention a lot on the show. So I'd actually love to know, like, what was your real intention? And were you even clear in what it was? Because the impact ended up probably being far beyond what you thought.
Yeah. My intention was curiosity of like, what does this type of promotion, what did this type of language, marketing say to us? And like, did I have some foresight that there would be a big conversation started from it? Yeah. Like I knew that, and I didn't set ground rules, and I just like my question was pretty open and broad and didn't have a sense of structure to support anyone who was participating in the conversation in maintaining for themselves, or like for me opening up the container. And so like in counsel work, there's often a prompt, and you go around and each person speaks their piece without interruption or commentary. And counsel work is something I'm trained in and value, and like find really to be a really great resource when doing social justice work. And like, it's often just this like open prompt, like, here's a topic, or like, here's a very open-ended question. And everyone comes to it from a different place of what's going on inside of them. And there's also a container of counsel, like, here are the 4 kind of tenets, which are, speak from the heart, listen from the heart, leanly, concisely, something else. And there isn't that container of shared agreement. Like when I go to a physical place to have a conversation like this with people, there's some sense of like what's allowed in the dialogue. And Facebook is such a like open range place where those agreements aren't established. And I'm seeing now, obviously, that I could have established those agreements of like what the conversation is going to be like, or what and like, to be perfectly honest, at that time, I didn't have a preference of how people participated. I still, don't really, because I don't necessarily think that everyone's comments are a reflection of me. I think they're a reflection of them. Yeah. And so you want to be rude, that's fine. You want to see that someone is rude in my feed and then think that I'm rude, that's your choice to associate those things. Yeah. I don't really care. I, like you, am not someone who really cares a lot what people think. And so I felt in integrity with the way that I maintained my comments and participation in the thread, in that particular thread. And And I felt like it was valuable because I honestly don't believe that first of all, I had reached out to the founder over the years about other things and never gotten a response or an acknowledgement. And so reaching out about this, after I've reached out about other things, not getting any acknowledgement or response, I wasn't inclined to think this person is open to a conversation. And so I didn't, because I wasn't really interested in what their intention was. I was interested in what my community felt the marketing and the language and the presentation of the summit spoke to the masses. That's what I was really curious, and that's what my question framed.
So I want to pause you for a second, because if anyone is listening and hasn't heard this in the context of like our show before, I just want to point out when Luna was reaching out to the people previously privately, people call that calling in. That's when you have some kind of existing, at least relationship or acquaintance, or make an attempt to, behind the scenes, reach out to someone and like have a dialogue about whatever it is. Making the public post is a calling out, and it's a public calling out, which part of what made this dialogue turn a little volatile was the debate over whether or not it's even appropriate to do that. And I think what's great to hear that a lot of people didn't know. So this is just such a valuable lesson for all of us. We make so many assumptions. We fill in so many details. I had no idea until just this moment when you said so, that you had reached out to them privately before.
Not about this.
Right.
But not about this.
Yeah.
Just
but still
had
with the
reached
history of no response, like you said, why would you expect? So could you have tried again? Sure, you didn't. This is what happened. But for anyone listening, giving context, because they know I love courageous communication in all of its facets, there's a really big difference between digital, private, public, all these things. Like there's so many variables. So keep going.
So really my intention was not to call them in or educate them. That was not my intention. That's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I had intent. Like, I don't want to spend my time. There's so many other people out there that's their work and their business, and please educate and pay them. Awesome. That's not what I'm here to do. And so I was starting a conversation about, how does this make you feel, community? Yeah. And that's, I very much got a temperature check on that. And got to
that's a good way of putting it. I got the temperature check.
Yeah, I got to see how people felt. And so what happened was that a conversation happened from there, which was awesome. And I was like, okay, this person is inviting me to step in. And in that space, I did educate. I felt so good about the conversation and the grace and the awareness and the way everything was brought forward, and then it was deleted. And I was pissed that my time was requested, and I showed up and gave over an hour of my time, and then it was deleted. I wanted to send an invoice for here's what an hour of my time costs, pay me. Yeah. Because I was pissed that my time was asked for and then not. And so the bigger picture is, I personally don't think that had I took the time to call the company in and have this dialogue one-on-one, that the result of them stopping the summit, the language that they're using now, and really what I believe to be heartfelt awareness and putting those glasses on of oh shit, look at how I can see things now, happened. I see one of the founders of Urban Priestess really being thank you. This has helped me. And it doesn't feel like lip service to me. No, and I really want to acknowledge that's a result. And I've been there. I've been called out. I've been in those shoes. It totally shook my reality in a way that invited me to change my framework, change my business, change my language, avoid spiritual bypass, all of these things, be aware of my privilege in new ways. And I don't know, had I reached out one-on-one and said, hey, this is what I see, and had a conversation, that same effect of really the whole new vision, whole new glasses, taking the time to really reassess and come back fresh, that feels hopefully that it will happen. And to to what has been communicated to me and publicly, it seems like it is happening. And that, if that's the result, was that my intention? No. Do I think that that's an amazing impact? Yeah. Do I think that other impacts happen because of that? Yes. And do I feel responsible for all of those impacts? No. Like, a lot of people commented and are responsible for their own ways in which they show up. And so, I mean, I learned a lot. And for me, a lot of it is just like, you know, in talking to you the other day, I was like, Facebook is not the place for this stuff.
Yeah.
I have these conversations in person. I live 20 minutes from Oakland, like, in a really enriching way that nourishes me. And I personally don't gain anything from that. Like, my intention was not to personally benefit from that post or conversation.
Well, and you weren't going for the takedown, is what I'm hearing you say. I actually didn't. So I want to correct myself, because you weren't even calling it out. You were starting a conversation out of curiosity. And it's funny because I got looped into it by seeing someone else's post. I didn't even know that your post was really the post that kind of sparked all these other people going, oh, hey, yeah, look at this. Oh, yeah, what is going on with this? Until like days later. I didn't know that the summit had been taken down even until days later. And so I think I love this. And thank you so much for being so willing to just like transparently share your experience, be very clear about how you feel about what your intentions were, what the impacts have been, as well as like what you are willing to take responsibility for and truly what is not your responsibility to take.
Yeah. And one of, you know, just because some people might not be looped into this, for me, the biggest takeaway from it was like the awareness at the time from like the very beginning stages were like, oh, it's about diversity. And I'm like, no, yes, it's about diversity, but not for the sake of diversity. Because like our conversation in the beginning about the truth that I'm remembering right now is like, it's about the deeper work. So if I'm just being diverse to be diverse because that's what's needed right now, and I'm not looking at what are the deeper issues that prevented this diversity from happening, then I'm not really learning the lesson. And so for me, diversity kept being brought up as like, this is the issue. This is the issue. We're not seeing enough people of color's faces. And like, that wasn't everyone's issue. People were upset about the way priestess was used, a million different things. Everyone's going to be upset about something unique to them. But for me, it was like, diversity is an effect. It's a product of deeper issues. So if we're just naming diversity as a problem and not looking at the deeper issues of what causes that lack of diversity, then we're not doing our due diligence. So for me, that was the bigger piece that some picked up on and some didn't.
Yeah.
But, you know, that for me is the work. And it seems like that's become aware of and become much more clear to the founders of that organization, and hopefully others and other people who have public platforms and businesses, that it's not just about like throwing a few people of color's faces into the mix to appear diverse and like somewhat be inclusive. It's about looking at the deeper issues of why is this not present in the first place?
Yeah. Something I really learned through these threads, which I really appreciated, was diversity. There's an aspect of representation and there's an aspect of inclusivity, which goes deeper than representation, because people weren't just upset. The cultural appropriation piece was that there are people who've literally like taken things from cultures and lineages, and then they're teaching them as if they're the expert and not including who taught them or where it came from. And you know what? This morning I was on Instagram and I saw a post. There's Stella McCartney. Did you see this? Put out a line.
But I like her.
It's like Fashion Week somewhere in the world. It's Fashion Week. And she has this new line of African print dresses.
Oh.
And the way she's charging for it and calling it and describing it is there's zero inclusion.
It's amazing because I studied fashion in school, my like first undergrad, and apparel design, and we studied costume history. And so in costume history, what you're doing is learning about what's going on in the culture at that time. Because when there's a war, camel print becomes popular again. When there's this becomes popular. Like all the things that are going on culturally are what fashion picks up on because it's a commodity and it makes money and it's like becoming more predominant. And with Black Panther, the movie, that is like, so it's just how it works. It's like, well, what's popular in culture and how can I benefit from it?
And that's exactly going back to your truth from the beginning. Exactly.
And like, that's the thing. It's, we have to decenter ourselves as a priority, or our businesses, or like humanity, like person-centered as well, because that impacts environments, other life species. But it's just decentering our own prioritization of ourselves or our businesses. And like, it's like, well, yeah, it is popular and it is going to be well received by those who in fashion who like need the next thing. And fashion industry is meant to be a system that perpetuates not enoughness, so that you buy the next thing.
Yeah.
And so this is just, it will be well received because it's popular in culture and it's becoming popular in culture. But if we're looking at the product and not the need, why is it becoming popular? Why is African culture becoming more aware of, more predominant, more, in particularly Western culture? Because the need for it to be acknowledged is coming up, but we're acknowledging it in these backwards ways, like appropriation, instead of acknowledging like, oh, my ancestors totally effed up and I'm perpetuating that colonial mindset. And here's like, I can acknowledge it by stopping some of these behaviors and beliefs inside of me, rather than acknowledging it by appropriating it.
Yeah. So I was on another thread where this was really interesting. So I'll ask you this because I don't know. What is your ethnic background or makeup?
I am a big mutt. I'm a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm Sicilian, Mediterranean, Balkan Islands, North African Muslim, West African, British, colonial, and Native American Cherokee.
So this makes sense. There's people who I look at and they resonate for me because literally they look like me. And this is how a lot of people like bond and feel comfortable. I'm Italian and Puerto Rican, and a little bit German and Irish. And something that's also come up for me as I've been unpacking around all these things is where has my place been ever, anywhere, as a mixed person, a person of mixed descent? I've never felt like I could totally embody like the Hispanic, like the Puerto Rican culture, because it's only a part of me. I've never even been to Italy. I couldn't actually even tell you where every part of my Italian family is from, because part of it, like on my dad's side, we don't even know. So there's this not knowing of myself because I can't even identify where some of my people are from. And I've also felt at times like envious of other people who have a culture, like people who are just one thing and they could be like, this is my thing. Like my family was born here. And it's so fascinating. And it comes around to what you start out with, like with the entitlement. And also what is appropriate, what is just appreciative, right? So some people are invited in and are initiated into a lineage, and people don't know that. And they might be calling something an appropriation that's not. And those of us we can still study and learn from things, right? Like I refer to one of the speakers in that summit is Sally Kempton. The number one book I've referred on this podcast is Awakening Shakti because of the stories, right? But I'm never like, I think there's a difference between appreciation and appropriation. So I just said a bunch of things. What do you think?
I definitely can empathize with the sense of like my internal conflict of like, think about the angst and upset of races and cultures that have orphanized each other and been victim to that, and that going on inside of me. So there's like the part of me that's like British colonial settlers in America, and then there's the part of me that's like Native American and West African. Yeah. And it's like, well, like it's all inside of me, and there's like that war of like shame, entitlement, like victimization, like uprising, like sacred rage, like all of these things, like I feel like a cauldron. And it's like all alchemizing inside of me to be embodied, to have all of those emotions be experienced and felt, and then embodied in a way that allows me to honor my truth, which has the experience of multiple cultures. And, you know, what you were sharing about even the Italian side, it's like, for me, there's a deeper understanding of orphanism, which happened in the Roman Empire. And colonialism is not just British people in America. The colonialism has been happening for centuries from all colors, from all cultures. This is not the first time. Just more recently, it has been that way. But the Roman Empire expanding really was what took away European culture to become like monochromatic, monoculture. Is even though there are like traditions that you would have from a German family versus a Scandinavian family versus an Italian family, there's these different traditions, but it has been diluted in such a way that it has become like monoculture because of the Roman Empire. And that really created a lot of orphanism, which is loss. For me, I'm phrasing that in the way of like loss of culture. And that loss of culture invites grief. Any loss invites grief. And if our ancestors are in a place of like having to survive and having to gentrify into a culture that is being indoctrinated across many, many, many lands, in order to survive, you have to lose your culture and go with what's happening in order to survive. And there's no time to grieve. And so what I've experienced for myself as I look back on many, many ancestors is this perpetual loss of culture. Yeah. Even from white European ancestors, is this perpetual loss of culture with very little time to grieve because of survival. And so my Native American ancestors like are in survival during that time. There's no sense of like having space to grieve, having time with your community to grieve. You're like trying not to go to a res or like whatever it is. You know, there's so many, you know, just trying to make it. And when that is passed down, that lack of time, inability to grieve, we have this kind of like colonial indoctrination of productivity and just going, doing, surviving. And that's, so many cultures have adopted this from being perpetuated from other cultures who also lost their culture. Yeah. So the Brits who came here like had also lost their culture and are coming from this lack of tools to grieve that loss of their ancestors, of their culture before their colonialization, their orphanage. And I'm not, you know, making anybody right or not right or not justifying, unvictimized, you know, but it's there for so many of us in every culture. And so, you know, for me, a lot of that is just being with the emotions of loss and learning how to grieve and learning how to welcome death as a teacher of life. And that's a big part of my study right now is like death as a teacher on how to learn how to live better. And as I study that, I see so much of the loss that's just in the daily things of life. It's not always like someone dying that you love. It's or, you know, a fire burning down your house, which is a big thing that's happened for a lot of people I know recently. There's loss all the time. And we live in a culture that doesn't have tools to grieve. Yeah. And unless we grieve and we can empathize with each other's loss and not center our own loss and understand that everyone is lost, and there are much more recent loss that can be centered for a time being. But my sense is in order for us to come together, everyone's loss has to be acknowledged. Everyone's grief, everyone's And I get that it's a lot more current for certain cultures and groups of people. And that deserves to be acknowledged. And the coming together is like, we all lost, and now we have to learn how to deal with it. Because that's what I think our generation is doing for our ancestors, is like, wow, there's been so much loss that hasn't been acknowledged. How can we support that?
This is I want to, first of all, I really appreciate your articulation and your understanding of so many things. One of my favorite things about having a podcast is how often people articulate a thing that I've been internally like working through, and puts language to a thing, and I'm like, oh, that is what I have been feeling. And so everything you just said around, like, everyone has their own loss that deserves to be acknowledged. Like, there's not a hierarchy of the loss. There are, though, things that are more current, but it's all like a resultant of other things. And of course, none of this justifies or puts anyone's experience higher than anyone else's. It just, for anyone listening, I hope as well, that's also bringing you to a place of being able to be like, oh, I get it. There's so many conflicting feelings here. So many people, like, we have a desire. We want to help. We want to be the change. We want to do better. And as we try, sometimes we mess up because we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know any better. But the loss piece feels so significant. So I don't really, regret is not something I feel often. And two regrets I have in my life, which I think it might be the only two, are related to this. One is my dad's whole side of the family is Puerto Rican that we know. There was an Italian side too. We just never had any relationship with them. And, he's fluent in Spanish. They all speak Spanish. They all live in Puerto Rico now. Some of them lived in the U.S. for a while, but they went home. And in my house growing up, my mom didn't want my dad speaking Spanish to us because she didn't want to be the only person who couldn't understand, because she had had so many experiences of being among his family and being the only person who couldn't understand. And she didn't want it in her own house. So for me, though, I could have been a fluent Spanish speaker from childhood, which is when it's easiest to learn, rather than taking it for so many years in school and still not being friggin' fluent, There's like a regret there, but I'm connecting it to like, it's also a desire to like have the culture and express it. And then the other thing is just not going abroad, not traveling during college, which would, again, it was about like maybe immersing myself in another culture and friggin' getting out of the monoculture, as you called it, here in the US. So I don't even have a question in that. That was just to share, because this is one of those fun conversations where there are some questions, but it's also just like a volley back and forth of kind of unpacking it as we go.
Yeah. I love what you shared. The second one feels like a regret. The first one is not based on a choice that you made yourself.
That's true.
So the idea of like, it's semantical, but like, it sounds like there's like disappointment and maybe even like upset towards your mom or like judgment in some way.
For a lot of years I had resentment. I don't resent it anymore. I get it now.
But like regret is like, oh, like I could have had something I didn't have. Yeah. And to me, it's hard to put loss into that, because you didn't have it, right? So loss is something that like we have and then lose.
Yeah.
But if you don't have it, it's like there's a whole other spectrum of loss, which is really desire. It's like that kind of acknowledgement of my disappointment of not having something I had is actually just simply naming a deep desire to have had it. And what I love about desire is that I like to, this is a framework for something I teach a lot, is like your desire can be looked at as from the place of lack. Like I desire something that I don't have, therefore I can see that I don't have it. And I'm looking at my desire of like, oh, I really want an X and I don't have it. Or we can look at our desire as an acknowledgement of like what's important to us, what we're ready to step into, what we're ready to receive. Like, oh, my desire is actually not a signification of what I don't have, but a communication of my readiness to receive this thing. Yeah. But if I'm always looking at it from the lack perspective, then I can't get it. And so I see desire as this kind of, the way in which you framed not having the language, it's not really lost because you didn't have it in the first place,
Right.
but it does communicate this beautiful desire. And so when we can look at desire as like showing you the abundance of what you craved, what you want, what you're like ready to step into, which could just be like deeper bilingualism.
Yeah.
Or like embracing your culture, that's probably a deeper part of it. It's different than like, oh, I didn't have this. So we get to decide how we use our desire as a way to look at what we're ready for, that we're ready to receive, that there's a sense of abundance there, or like, oh, damn it, I still don't have this thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I just love kind of like having the power to use our desire in whatever way we choose. And your example, I wasn't saying you are or are not doing anything, but I loved using that to bring up that framework. Because I think for me, that framework has been so powerful in using being in relationship with my desire to inform me of what I'm ready for, or ready to receive, or ready to step into.
Yeah. Okay. As you were saying all of that, there was another connection / distinction that was beginning to land for me. And I want to be able to articulate it. I love this. I love when I can connect the dots on things and kind of synthesize. It connects like 3 or 4 of the things that we've talked about so far. So growing up, I remember feeling very embarrassed that my body was developing into like a very stereotypically womanly body. From like the 3rd grade, I started growing breasts. Again, that Puerto Rican side started showing in the booty. In middle school, I'm playing basketball in the schoolyard. I was a huge tomboy. All I wanted to do was wear baggy clothes to cover it up. Kids are yelling out, "Hey, yo, Liz has a big ass." And for years, I joked that I will always be so appreciative of J-Lo and Kim Kardashian for making it like an okay, if not a desirable thing to have a big ass. Like I said that year, like 10, 15 years ago. Now, here I am in Los Angeles, and like butt implants are a real thing now. Like breast implants have been a thing, but like butt implants are a thing now. So it kind of goes back to the thing that you're saying, fashion or the appearance industry, because that's not just fashion, cosmetics, going, what's popular now? And turning it into this massive thing. But again, and it goes to like the colonialism and even like the ecosystem type of thing where we shift one thing because right now it's going to give us some kind of instant gratification or instant profit without having any way of knowing the impact it's going to have on the culture like decades from now. So again, there's not a question.
We don't know.
I'm just tossing it into the cauldron. What do you think?
I love to hear your experience of your childhood because I still have like a 12-year-old boy body. Like I did when I was 12 and still do. But what I took away from that was like this kind of rising of the feminine. It's like the curves, the booty, the breasts. It's like there's a missing link that when I think of desire, okay, so we're desiring to be seen in a certain way, which can be sexualized, can be commodified. And there's a deeper, I think, subconscious underlying piece that culture has that it misses the mother. It misses like a deeper sense of like woman. And so if we're looking at desire to show us what we're ready to receive and what we're ready to step into and what we're ready to kind of embrace more of, and we look at breast and butt implants, we can talk about it in the sense of like, oh, well, this is like for men. This is like to sell cars. This is to like be sexualized and commodified in some way. Or, I always look at like, what is the deeper subconscious collective desire for this? And like so much of our willingness to look at breasts in one way and not another, why celebrities can like have their breasts out and about and like a woman breastfeeding gets shamed,
right.
Or like their photo taken down, whatever it is, it's the same thing, but it's coming from a different place. And so when we have men who want breasts and ass and like to look at that, to have that be the first thing you see, to have that be a need that the culture is like getting implants for these things because we see it lacking. It's a deeper issue of like, yeah, there's a sexualization of it, of like woman for the benefit of men, for lack of a better word. And I think that there's a deeper lack of connection to the bigger picture of woman that includes the archetype of mother.
Yeah.
And when we can kind of just like, you know, when you talked about the truth and I was like, oh, well, I'm just like, once I acknowledge this, then I can like reclaim it.
Yes.
And so for me, it's like when we can look at that cultural need for mothering and for the lack thereof, and it's beautiful because we talked about kind of nationalism a little bit and countries and culture. And you talk about your mother country, your motherland. And the fact that there is this orphanism and so many people have been removed from that place of their motherland, that we're so deeply craving that sense of nurturance and home, and we'll try to find it in different ways. But that sense of like, even just bringing it back to the conversation that we had with like nationalism and land and culture, that sense of mother is gone.
For a lot of people.
Yeah, for most people in America.
Yes, for sure.
Besides those who are indigenous.
Yeah. That is so... I had an interview, my first interview of the day today. I've been going back and forth between interviewing and being interviewed, was with a Lebanese woman who came here when she was 17 years old, Nagam, and her interview will have been up by the time that yours is up. And it was such a fun conversation. She's so interesting. I loved her story. But she had one of those, exactly what you were just describing earlier, where they had to leave their country within like 2 months.
Right.
There was no time to grieve. And then you were just here and you were just assimilating. And she was saying how like that first year, it was so disorienting because like there was barely time to say goodbye. And then all of a sudden, like you're in a new place. And then whatever you need to do to survive in the new culture, you know, that's happening. And it's just so, for the first time ever, I had the thought that with the U.S., the way it is right now, there's so many people who were like, can I leave? Can I get out of here? And so just also the implication of being a place that people have fled to becoming a place that people want to flee from. Again, no question, just tossing it into the cauldron.
Yeah, it's just like we're so young.
Yeah.
I mean, besides the indigenous history of this land of Turtle Island of North America is so long and untrace backable. Mm-hmm. And the culture that's here now is such a baby. There have been so many countries where it's like, this is the greatest place. And it's like, get me the hell out of here. This has happened with fight for power. When we look at power in the way of like taking it, of like rape culture, of mentality of like human centeredness, of like, I can just take what I want. And that's the way we claim power. You know, it only works for so long. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's definitely a huge part of the foundation of this culture and of other cultures prior to this. And we're such a young place, and who knows what in the long run of humanity, however long that is, that this place will shape to be. And we who live here have the power to determine that. If we put this in the hands of people in a position of power, whoever we deem those to be, and exclude ourselves from that power, we're doing ourselves such a great disservice. And, you know, that's why my focus is on leadership, because everyone's a leader in their own right. Everyone is making an impact with their choices, whether we want to claim that title or not. We're leading our environment, those around us, our family, our community, with our quietness, with our not saying anything, with our speaking up, with our choices, no matter what they are. And so when I think power is such a beautiful thing, because for me, power is on the ability to choose in each moment my response. My power of choice is the greatest power I have. And so if we're choosing to give people in a position of power, leaders of this country, government, whomever we believe that those people are, and excluding ourselves from being in that leadership position, from being in that position of power, we are doing such a great disservice. And so who knows what it'll all become, but I know that we can choose to be a part of that and contribute to it in different ways. And we're totally going to make mistakes. Like, I make mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm a leader, and I do. Does that mean that I'm perfect and I have it all figured out? Absolutely not. But I'm willing to put skin in the game.
Yeah. This is amazing. I enjoyed this conversation so much. I don't know that I've ever had in all the interviews. We're coming up. By the time this airs, I'm sure you're beyond episode number 250. So of all the interviews, I don't know that I've ever had one before. It was so much more of just being like, here's what I think. What do you think? And less like question oriented. So I really, really appreciate being able to just explore with you. And I think it's perfect because we're both in deep exploration of this. And even, my interview on your show, which we'll link up in the show notes here. And then we're excited to have you here to just be like, we're both in this cauldron. We're both going, we want to be of service. We'd love to be of service. We're not perfect, but we're not quitting. And whoever wants to listen and join in, we're here for it. We might even get messages from this of people being like, that was off. Great. Like, just be kind, y'all. We want your feedback, but be kind about it. Like, we're wanting to make progress. We're wanting to have beyond the better side of impact that helps as many people as possible and excludes as few, if none, hopefully. But even in this conversation, we might have messed up. So definitely let us know if we did, but do it with kindness so we can learn and then continue to integrate and implement and do better. So Luna, you're so great. I'm sure you know how great you are, but I'm just telling you. We're going to put links
fun being here.
to your site, to your podcast, to all your stuff. So we didn't even get to, I'm not having any of those conversations on social media anymore. I'm only having them here.
Nice. I'm adopting that from
publicly.
My conversation with you on Monday. I'm like very much like, all right, shifting away, and then like really reassessing my intention of like, what am I using that space for?
Yeah. If anything.
And that's, and I'm open to somebody coming in and telling me, this is a good idea, this is not a good idea, and having some feedback in that way. But no, I appreciate it. And I love being here with you and having this conversation here and getting to know you more and talking more and hearing more of your story as well.
Super, super fun. So thank you. And everyone listening, this is definitely the kind that I recommend listening to more than once. We unpacked a lot of stuff. So have a listen. This is a good one to like invite some friends to be like, y'all, did we know this? Did we not know this? What's going on? This is a good one to explore and to use as a bridge, maybe to invite people in your life who aren't having these conversations, who you would like to, not from a like, I'm better than, or I need to be right place, but just, again, sharing the curiosity, being like, what do you think about all of this? And you never know. It might be bridges to more connection with people. If this resonated for you, share it. This is important and it's relevant stuff. It's not going to go away. And something that Luna said earlier, awareness without aligned action is futile. I also really believe that we're held responsible to our highest level of awareness energetically and out in the world and spiritually. So if you know better, you have a responsibility to do better. So that's my little call to action for everyone listening. So again, Luna, thank you so much. Everyone listening, thank you all, and we'll see you later.
Like for the longest time, I wasn't comfortable. Like, so when I'm with the analyst people, I just talk about analysts, analyzing data and all that. When I'm with the creative people, I talk about I never mention the other part of me until the play happened, because then my coworkers came and watched the play.
And were they like, what the hell?
Yeah. They're always like, wait, you're an analyst and what the heck? Like, how did you? Yeah. And then my actors and the people who were helping me with the play knew I had a full-time job that has nothing to do with the play. So yeah, that's when I was like, you know what? I'm done trying to like hide. I'm interested in all of that, and I'm doing all of that, and I'm okay with it, and it's okay in my standards, and whatever. Leave me alone.
I appreciate that a lot. And when you say leave me alone, did anyone actually bug you about it, or were you in your head thinking that they would?
Yeah, in my head, or sometimes comments like, oh, you're doing too much, or slow down, or stuff like that. And I would sometimes think about it. I'm like, am I doing too much? Like, okay, yeah, I'm aware when I'm overwhelmed, and I'm aware when I need to like prioritize, but I'm okay. Thank you. Like, I'm not doing too much. I want to do all this stuff, and I'm still okay. Like, I'll I'll let you know when I can't handle it anymore.